Let's get going. So what I wanted to speak today is that we know that the parsha of Balak has these what are supposed to be curses, because Bilam is employed to curse Am Yisrael. So they're supposed to curse them, but we know that out of these curses, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells them, only whatever I say to you are you allowed to say. And so therefore they come out not curses but rather brachas. And we know that one of the things that we say, I'm not sure if we're going to get to it over the next couple of days, Ma tovu alecha Yaakov mishkan l'tech Yisrael. As soon as we walk into a shul, or just before we walk into the shul, we say Ma tovu alecha Yaakov, how beautiful are your tents, or how goodly, they say, Tovu, are your tents, Yaakov, Mishkanotecha, Israel, your dwelling places, Israel. Those are the words of this terrible person, Bilam, who, and it's interesting to understand that why it is that we use his words as we walk into a shul, his praise of Bnei Israel. So that part of it is because when the enemies praise us, Chazal explain, when the enemies praise us, then it's real praise, as opposed to when our friends praise us. Everybody's a little bit sycophantic at some point in time. But when our enemies praise it, then we know that it's real praise. But what I'd like to do is to go to look rather at the beginning of this process of Bilam, because when he arrives to Balak, they build a little bit of an altar, and then Bilam says to Balak, and the next morning when it's ready to go, it's now a new day, they're about to start the whole cursing, and Bilam says to Balak, Vayomi Bilam el Balak, Beneli bazeh shiva mizbachot, va'achenli bazeh shiva parim, v'shiva elim. He says, build me, I want 7 altars, and on those I want also 7 bulls and 7 elim and 7 rams. I want them ready for him. Now, obviously the number 7 is important here, but the Ibn Ezra says something quite deep, which is quite difficult to understand actually. And he says, Shiva mizbachot, what's this business of 7? Yesh sodot amukim, lo yevinun, ki masay mispar. He said there are such incredibly deep secrets that only a few people can really understand in the number of number 7. V'shvi b'yamim v'chadashim v'shanim v'shiva kvisei ola, because they're the number of 7 that sits in the days and in the months and in the years and in the 7 kvasim. On many of the chagim, we bring 7 kvasim. V'shiva hazaot, and we sprinkle blood 7 times. Gam amar Hashem le'Iyov, and also Hashem said to Iyov, "Kachu lachem shiva parim b'shiva elim." Hashem said to Iyov also, "You must bring 7 bulls and 7 rams." V'teid shalom l'shalom. And when you do that, there'll be a great level of ruach bina. Understands it. And the only reason I brought this to you, not to explain it, because I don't really understand it. But it's clear that this number 7 for Bilam was an enormous thing. We know that it's the number of the natural world, it's the number of the weeks, and all of these things. Why it's so important at this point is not so clear. But Vayaz Balak kasher diber Bilam. Vayal Balak Bilam par v'ayil b'mizbeach. So Balak did exactly what Bilam had asked him, and they bring up a bull and a ram on each of the altars. Vayom Bilam leBalak. And then Bilam says, okay, now we're ready to go. You stay here on all your olot, on all your offerings, the elcha, and I'm going to go. And I'm going to go. What am I going to go to do? I'm going to go now to go and see whether or not HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to speak to me. But remember, Hashem had said, and he had told Balak that he would only do what Hashem has told him. Maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu will happen upon me. He says, and whatever he tells me, I'll tell you. He went out on his own. He goes to do what he has to do. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu meets Bilam. And the word Vayikar, the Rashi points out that the word Vayikar is a Loshen Arai. It's a language of like a temporary thing. It's Loshen Ganai. It's actually quite degrading. Loshen Tumat Keri. It's the language of the Tumah of Keri. Keri is a seminal emission. Klomar, Bakoshi v'vizayon. What does that mean? That when HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals himself to Bilam, he does it in a very degrading fashion. And not only that, the only reason why he's prepared, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is prepared to engage with Bilam during the day, in order to show Hashem's love for the Jewish people. And he goes up to him and Vayomer Elav, and Bilam says to him, I've set up these 7 mizbachot, and I've brought up the ram, and I've brought up the bull on each one. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts words into the mouth of Bilam. Vayomer shuv el Balak. He says, and Hashem says to him, now go back to Balak, and this is what you have to say to him. Vayashav elav, and he goes back to Balak. And now you're there by the offerings. They're all engaging in this amazing process of these 7 offerings. And Bilam starts his mashal, he starts his themes, he starts the discussion that Hashem had told him what to speak about, and he says, and he speaks about how the fact that Balak had brought him there to come and told him to do what? Come and curse Yaakov and tell of the destruction of the Bnei Israel. Why is it, says Rashi, that Bilam speaks about Yaakov and Yisrael? So Rashi says, Bishnei Shmoisayin, with both names that we're called Yaakov and we're called Yisrael. Why? Amar lo lakalam, he told him to curse them. Why? Shema echad mehem eino muvak. Because maybe one of them isn't correct. And it's an amazing thing that Balak and Bilam understood the depth of the Jewish people. The Netziv explains that when the Torah uses the word Yaakov or the word Yisrael to describe Yaakov or Bnei Yisrael, it's talking about 2 different spaces in which they exist. The word Yaakov is the space of Yaakov in the natural world, the Jewish people as we go in our natural way. But Yisrael is L'mayla min hateva. And it's an amazing thing to realize that Balak and Bilam understood that Bnei Israel operate in these 2 parallel universes in a way. The one is the way that we just go according to the way the world is and we just exist within history. But actually what we're doing is a completely meta historical experience over and above everything that's happening. He got it. And so therefore what he does is he's trying to tap into the
Sorry, Rav, you're breaking up. We can't hear you. Why don't you switch your video off maybe?
And he says, Maikov, Lo Kabael, Baruch Baruch Hu doesn't want them. Let me switch, I'll switch my video. Is that better now?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah, that's better. Well, we can't hear you now.
There we go. Can you see me now? Can you hear me?
You can hear you and see you. Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna. Okay. So as we were saying, so it says, how can I curse them if Hashem doesn't want them to be cursed? And how can I bless? How it's not in my hands. And if that's the case, what shall I do? And then he says, this is what Hashem told me. Mirosh Tzurim Erenu. He says, when I looked at them, I could see them from the Rosh Tzurim. Rosh Tzurim is this beautiful image of the mountaintops. And he's able, Erenu, I saw him. And we give out Ashurenu. And from the heights, give out Ashurenu. It's also like in a way, I gaze onto them, I see them. How do I see them? What do I see Bnei Israel as being? I see them as being this Am Levadad, this nation on its own. And they're not considered amongst the goyim, amongst the people, amongst the nations of the world. So says Rashi, what does that mean? Says Bilam. Remember, Bilam has this deep understanding of who Bnei Israel are, and he says, "Ani mistakel bereshitam v'tchilat shorashayim." He says, when I look at them and I'm trying and curse them, I've got to go and find the weak points within them. Where do I find weak points? The weak points are normally in the foundations. And I go into the beginning of Bnei Israel, the shorish of Bnei Israel. V'ani ro'eh otam miyusadim v'chazakim ketzurim ugvaot. And what do I see? I don't see cracks. I don't see faults in the foundations, but rather I see them deeply grounded, miyusadim v'chazakim, and strong. Ketzurim, they're like stones, they're like rocks, they're like mountains. Al yedei avot ve'imahot. Why? Because they have two things. They have avot and they have imahot. And we could say very simply because of the avot and the imahot, and there we go. That's the reason why they're so deeply rooted. But I think there's something much more in this. We know we have this idea of Shema beni musar avicha v'al titosh Torah imecha. That there's this concept that we should listen to the Torah of our fathers and the Torah of our mothers. Rav Soloveitchik explains that there are two aspects that are being brought out here. The musar avicha means the discipline teaching of the father, and Torah Timecha is the Torah of the mother. What is that? Torah is hora'ah. Hora'ah means teaching, guidance. So the father, says Rav Soloveitchik, that energy is a much more disciplined, structured space, and hora'ah is a much more heartfelt space. So what is Rashi telling us here? If we're going to use that as our basis, that Rashi is telling us that Bilam saw that within the Jewish people, there are two fundamental yesodot. There are two fundamental spaces in which the Jewish people are grounded. And those spaces are the spaces of, number one, the structure and the discipline, which is, let's call it the Gevura part of it. But in addition to that, there's also the chesed of the mothers. And therefore, we have a dual grounding and a dual foundation. And that's what he saw. And he saw that if that's the case, if there's so much of these two aspects that are grounding the Jewish people, so there's no way I can curse them. There's no way I can get to them. I can't find their weakness because that's where they are. Hem am levadad yishkon. And what does it mean that they're a nation that dwells alone? Says Rashi, Hu asher zachu lo avotav lishkon badad. That's not a negative thing. That was the schut of their parents, of their avotav, of their fathers, was that they made them into a nation that didn't need anyone else to be able to fill them with meaning and with a space that would give them something to achieve greatness. They can achieve greatness within themselves because they have everything. They have this foundation. He says, what does it mean? Lo yiyu na'asim kala im sha'ar ha'umot. He says, they'll never be destroyed like all the other nations. Einam nimnim im ha'sha'ar. We never counted without all the others. We're always on our own. Davar acher, says Rashi, k'shehen smeichim. This is such an interesting insight in Rashi. When they are happy, ein uma smecha imahem. No other nation is happy with them. That's part of our lot, isn't it? When we rejoice, no one rejoices with us. Because it is in a way a recipe for what could be perceived to be in a way at some point in time arrogance, right? That we have everything. We have this incredible foundation. We're happy to be on our own. We don't need anybody else, but we don't need them even when we are happy. Nobody rejoices with us. It's a great musa that part of what we need to make sure that we work on is that with internally at least is that we're able to share simchas, which we do, and not in any way to forgive anyone some type of great simcha. And then he said when the nations of the world are enjoying the fruits of their own success, everybody enjoys it. We're not included in that. And we're not included amongst the nation of the world. So we have this kind of lonely existence, and this Bilam recognized. The Emek Davar, the Netziv, explains that who are the Rosh Tzurim? The Rosh Tzurim are the great leaders of the Jewish people. There's a power in the in our Gedolim, in our great leaders, in our great sages, that they're the real ones. The real ones are so powerful that they give us such a depth that we don't want to be anywhere else. We don't want to be mixed up. And then he says, he says, not like any other nation. Says that when the other nations of the world are put into exile, then what happens is that they mix and they interact and intersperse with the nation that exiled them, and in that way they build up their own chashivut, their own importance within the eyes of the people that exiled them, much more so than when they were separate from them. That's not the way the Jewish people work. Because we're on our own. We don't mix. We don't mix. We interact. Rabbi Lappin, David Lappin, one of the most brilliant. He said, as Jews, we have an obligation to interact into the world. We have an obligation to be part of the world in which we live in, but we have an absolute issur of integration into the world. And I think that's such a fundamental difference. And he says, when we don't mix, then we rest in a nice restful fashion. That is our honor. Our honor is not to intermingle into everybody, but rather to be seen on our own. Why? Because when we behave in the appropriate way and we do what we're supposed to be seen, then the people see us as being the people of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And nobody will start with us. And so I think that's such an important thing that Bilam points out to Balak. That understanding that here's a nation that's coming towards them, but they're on their own. And because they're on their own, that is in their power. Their power is not to create allies of all different sorts, but our power is to be real, to be value-based, and to ensure that we have integrity with the people that we are. Let's stop there, and Be'ezrat Hashem will continue tomorrow. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Sorry about the glitch in the middle of the shiur. God bless.